Hello, welcome to Rappler Talk. I'm Marites Vitug, and joining us is Senate Minority Leader, Senator Franklin Drilon. He's been in the Senate for the longest time, 21 years, and we're going to talk about what to expect from the new or incoming Senate and his thoughts as well on the diminished opposition number of senators in the forthcoming Senate. Thank you, Senator Drilon, for joining us.
Thank you, Marites, for having me.
Yes, and thank you for agreeing to answer all questions.
I will answer all questions
Yes.
to the best of my knowledge.
So first things, maybe the shock has diminished, but everybody's still wondering what happened to the opposition in 2019. This is the first time after, in the post-Marcos midterm election history, that 0 seats for the Senate.
Yes. Well, firstly, in the last election, we were confronted with a situation where the president was very popular. 85%, or the DE socioeconomic class in our country, was supporting him, as indicated by the surveys. In fact, on all points of governance, human rights, unemployment, every aspect of governance, he was getting flying colors, and therefore he was a very popular president. He was able to translate this into a support of his candidates. As I look at it as the 85% of our people felt that the president was one of them. They could associate themselves with him, especially that he was perceived as an outsider to the political elite of Metro Manila. And so as I said, socioeconomic class D&E, which constitutes about 85% of our population, rallied behind him. And also the social media. Social media can be expensive, the trolls can be expensive, and the resources were with the administration. So to me, these are the major factors that caused the loss of all the candidates. And also, there was, we did not check the temptation of attacking the president as an opposition. And given all of this, the popularity of the president, it did not work, that strategy. Instead of pointing out the shortcomings of your competition, meaning the other candidates for senator, we attack the personality of the president, the person of the president, who was very popular. And therefore, in my view, that strategy did not work. And I'm saying this is a natural response. Many times in the past political campaigns, you always attack the administration. And maybe some political scientists have suggested maybe we should have pointed out the deficiencies of the other candidates. So, well, as you said, it's always a 2020 vision, but, that's how it works.
For example, the phenomenal performance of Senator Bongo.
Yes.
He wasn't really attacked by the opposition.
Yes, he was not, yes.
Because
the traditional thinking is this. This is a multi-choice body. You're supposed to vote for 12. If I attack Bongo, his followers may not vote for me. In other words, it's an unnecessary irritation that I will cause to his supporters. The traditional thinking is, I will sell myself without putting down the next guy, so that by that technique, even if they are administration people, I can have a slot in their 12 slots that the voters will vote for.
But we never had a president as popular as Duterte, because I remember that President Pinoy also enjoyed high popularity rating for 4 years.
Yes, yes, but as I said, maybe the fact that 85% of our people identified with him. He's not a brand, Rojas, he's not an Aquino, he's not an Osmeña, he's not a Ponce Enrile. He was outside with brands. And that would have, that I think in my view, that made him attractive to the people who wanted some change.
So what made Bongo attractive? Number 3? He landed number
No,
3.
the Bongo relied on the popularity of the president. He identified himself as bata ako ni presidente.
Same with Bato de la Rosa
Yes.
and Francis Tolentino.
Yes,
no?
yes.
Oh. So, what is your advice to these new senators? You know, there are a number of them. Although Lapid is returning, Bong Revilla is returning, but at least for the new ones.
For the new ones, committee chairmanship is not the be-all and the end-all. Yes, you can be the committee chairman, but that doesn't make you in the Senate, because we are like in a fishbowl. We get scrutinized. There are just 24 of us. You be absent, the media will notice you. And that is why you must study, because committee chairmanship means you have to take the floor and defend the bills that your committee will present. And that is when the fun starts if you don't study.
So, to be a senator, you need to be articulate. You have to have debating skills.
That's right.
Isn't that a big chunk of your work in the Senate?
Yes, that's I agree with that. Your previous exposure to the various fields of governance or various fields of the social of life, of public life. So because here 101 topics would come up. And Marites, to me, legislation is the art of the compromise. You know, you cannot have everything, but you must be able to find a compromise that will serve the interests of the public. You know, not to the full extent, but because there are various interests in our society, but to the extent that you can find a common ground, that is the key to legislation.
And there have been reports about these newbies already aiming or wrangling for committee chairmanships. But we talked earlier about tradition and seniority in the Senate. So what committees are reserved for seniors?
There are the so-called important, they're not important, I changed that, major committees, so-called major committees. This would be, for example, finance, the budget, the ways and means, the blue ribbon, justice, education, health. These are some of the major committees. And by tradition, usually the seniors are given preference and priority. In other words, you sit in the table. Oh, Frank, what kind of committee do you like? And I am, if I say XYZ committee, usually in the absence of very strong objections, that is, we defer to the senior ones. That's the tradition. I'm not saying that's the rule, that's the tradition. If you want to break that tradition, that's no one can stop you.
But you're with the minority. Even if you're senior, very senior, you're with the minority, yet you get to chair committees.
No, well, yes, you've got to chair committees, but usually the committees that are given to you are those committees that the majority senators would not want to handle.
For
That's the
example,
reality.
the crumbs.
Yes. Well, I'm not calling it the crumbs. I'm just saying that the committees that they would not want to handle. Example, Marita, Committee on Ethics.
That's a minefield.
It's a minefield.
Who chairs that? Do you chair that?
No, I don't chair that. It's the committees that the majority senators would not want to handle usually.
going back to the minority, you'll only be 4 left in the opposition, in the incoming Senate, except that Senator De Lima obviously cannot
yes.
vote. That just leaves 3 of you.
Yes.
So can you still do something? Can you still, block legislation or at least maybe propose compromises? Can you still do that?
Well, I'd like to recall what Senate President Soto said. Si Drilon po ng 10 na yan eh. Because I study. And, in the Senate, we have a tradition that we cannot cut a debate. We have the rule that you cannot, or the tradition, that as long as I have questions, I cannot be cut, my time cannot be cut. You give me all the time. That is why in our history in government, you recall Roselier Lim, who who stood up and took the floor and filibustered.
That's the term.
That's the term, filibustered.
The whole night or
the whole
something,
night.
yes.
Because we have a rule that you cannot cut the debate, and that is the effective tool that prevents the Senate from being a rubber stamp. Because I can stand on the floor and ask all questions under the sun, and by tradition, the Senate President cannot stop me. So if you want to have a reasonable compromise, you propose it so that I will stop asking the questions.
That's interesting. So
Yes.
that is a role that the opposition can play.
Even if there's only one. Yeah. Yes, and you will not notice it, but that's happening on a daily basis in the session hall. When I stand up and I have, off the record, I say, I cannot accept this. So they say, what is acceptable to you?
But do you discuss that before the session starts, or?
Well,
like
it really has, there is really no rule. We can discuss it in caucus before the session starts, or during the session itself. There is no rule. What is important is that we have a tradition of non-closure. You cannot close the debates as long as I have questions.
Okay,
So that makes the opposition different from the opposition in the House. In the House, they can stop the debate and outvote the opposition. Here, we cannot. The majority, by tradition, cannot invoke the cloture rule.
very interesting. So, for example, in the incoming Senate, the proposed bills which were reported on was lowering of the age of criminal responsibility, the charter change. So these can all be heavily debated, and you can stand there for 10 hours.
Yes, that's correct.
Really?
Yes, that's correct. And as
Okay.
I said, the tradition is that there is no closure of the debates.
So how about the leadership in the Senate? Again, all this speculation about Senator Soto not being the next Senate president. What's your thought about keeping him or not keeping him?
Well, the minority has no role in the presidency of the Senate. That is a choice of the majority. That's our democracy. The majority rules. So, under our Constitution, the vote of 13 senators would be needed to elect a Senate president. And that means it is 13 that would constitute the majority. So that's where it is.
But how was your experience under Senate President Soto?
Okay,
Working
but
with him?
I have a good working relationship with Senator Soto. He respects us. He sees to it that we are treated fairly. He does not forget that he is the president of the Senate, not of the majority. So he has been fair. We have disagreements, but we try to look for a solution.
And, well, have you ever experienced before being being part of a three-man woman opposition in the Senate?
Not, well, I don't recall. in the past Congress, or there were 6 of us, a net of 5 because Laila was in. But 3 and 5 is no difference. So we have gone through 3 years where there are just 5 of us or 6 of us out of 24. But nobody can say that we just allowed everything to happen because we are in the minority. I would go back to our tradition of no cloture.
So in your experience, have you heard your colleagues say, the president wants this passed? He talked to us and he wants this. This is a priority.
Yes. That is not unusual. That happens. The president wants this. But precisely with a Senate elected nationwide, the senators feel that their mandate is the same as the president because they are elected by the same electorate. And therefore, we have the mandate of the people, of the entire country, versus a congressman who has the mandate of the district. That is why we cannot be subjected to the same pressure that ordinarily applies to the congressman.
Yeah. And also in your long experience in the Senate, you've seen alliances shift among, the party.
Very much so, yes.
So you see this happening again, and how do these alliances work?
Yeah,
there are no parties. So on what on what basis are these alliances shaped?
Yes, you correctly identified the problem. The very weak political party structure. Elections are based on personalities, particularly the Senate. The shifts in alliances are not uncommon. But if you look back, the shift in alliances usually happens towards the end of the president's term.
So you mean the next 3 years?
The next 3 years there will be. I hope I had a crystal ball to predict exactly what will happen. But on the basis of our past experiences, it would appear that political alliances would be volatile once the next election, towards the end of the term of the president.
And these alliances shift also based on an issue-to-issue, is it issue-to-issue basis?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. For example, I'll give you a specific example. The vote on the American basis. Okay? All of these 24 members of the Senate at that time, or 22, got into the Senate because of the popularity of Cory Aquino. Towards the end of President Aquino's term, the basis agreement came into force. We lost in the Senate. So that is an example that towards the end of the term of the president, I think it was last year.
Yes,
1991. I should know. I was the executive secretary. That is an example of what I'm talking about.
So would you describe the next 3 years as years wherein Duterte will be a lame duck president? Or it's too
difficult
early?
to say. Difficult to say because no president has enjoyed this kind of popularity that he has. But that his popularity will wane, I do not discount that in the next 3 years. But nobody can say.
During the campaign for the midterm elections, I asked you earlier, you went to your area, a region in Iloilo.
Yes.
What did you find out about, why is Duterte, you said earlier that he is embraced by the people because he's seen as not part of the elite, he's one of them. This is what you got also from the ground when you went around in Iloilo.
Well, yes, plus the it's almost a fear of the administration on the local government officials, so that they do not even want to be seen with you.
Even with you?
Even with me,
Oh
you know.
my.
So that's the reality that we faced in this last election. Takot yung mga local government officials
Because
they see that the administration will not hesitate to use the powers in the administration to achieve political ends.
so pwede pala yun mag-combination of popularity and fear.
Yes, pwede. Of course. Why not?
I was wondering, how can a president who uses fear be popular?
Well, that question is answered with
In the
President
election.
Duterte and the election.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you also about a recent experience you had with the president. I remember that you gave him advice about being cautious and careful in reviewing government contracts
Yeah.
because it affects the sanctity of contracts. And then he got back at you and said that he was going to suspend the writ of habeas corpus.
What's your question?
Were you surprised by that? And does this kind of reaction stop you from
wa-
airing your thoughts?
I was surprised because the response had nothing to do with my public statement that let's exercise caution in reviewing these contracts because government's credibility insofar as a contracting party is concerned would be on the line. That was all that I said.
Exactly.
I could not understand. The response had no relation whatsoever to what I said.
No, maybe because he doesn't like contrary opinion.
Well, I don't know. That's a matter.
But anyway, does this stop you, from saying things you want to say?
No, I don't think so.
Because he said he will suspend the writ of habeas corpus.
No, that's why I said I was surprised because the response of the president has nothing to do with. I mean, it's totally on a different field. Yeah?
Okay, so at least it doesn't stop you
No,
from
no,
saying what you like to say.
No, it doesn't stop.
So now let's go to the next 3 years. Your last 3 years in the Senate
Yes.
and in your government life and in politics. So what can we expect from you?
Maybe my family should be the one asking that, not you. Huh? My family now, what do we expect? What do we expect from you now that you're out of government? Now, in the next 3 years, I'll continue my role as the minority leader. If allowed by my colleagues to continue as minority leader, I will do so. And continue to scrutinize the policies that come across the Senate in the form of legislation. I will see, to the best of my judgment, whether or not this is consistent with public interest or if private interests are served with these policies being proposed. I will continue to do that, and I would like to believe that, given my experience in the bureaucracy, I could contribute to the national welfare. But having said that, I also started to do my memoirs because I would like to think also that having been in government since the time of Cory in 1986, I have had some experience in governance. It's not easy to research given the length of time that I've been in government, but I will try to present governance from my perspective in the last 30 years or so that I've been in government.
You've been in government for as old as EDSA People
That's
Power
correct.
One, right?
Yes, right.
Maybe can you just give us an example of, because I know and we know that you work very hard, you study the bills, and can you give us an example of something you have spotted that seemed to be innocuous, but you were able to change, or maybe for the
maybe,
better?
all right. Two recent examples. The first one was on the budget, when the Senate President correctly took the position that this budget was not validly passed because the bicameral conference did not approve what appeared in the printed copy after the budget was presented. And because of this position, the Senate President refused to sign the budget correctly, because he said, I cannot certify that this was validly passed insofar for as the 75 billion insertion is concerned. So it got to a situation where, because of this position taken, the budget could not be signed.
Yes.
I studied it and I suggested to the Senate President Soto that maybe what we can do is have Senate President Soto sign a qualified approval, meaning that he certifies that the budget underwent the legal processes except for the 75 billion, and he will take an exception to that. And it is on my advice that Senator Soto did that. So we were able to send the budget to the President for his signature. And then I made a public statement that the President has to exercise his line item veto power to veto the 75 billion, because that's not constitutional. And the President, whether or not it was because of my statement that he vetoed, the fact is he vetoed those 75 billion in projects, insertions, because a week before that he said, I am prepared to veto the entire yes. So that is, I can assert that that's part of how I work in the Senate. It's not because I'm opposition that, I'll just let this do.
Was this the first time it ever happened in the Senate, that a Senate President signed the budget with reservations?
To my recollection, yes. Since 1995, when I was at the Senate, that has never happened. And that was the first time.
Yes. And the other example you were going to share
with us? The other example is the recent bill which tried to reorganize NEDA. NEDA is, the creation of NEDA is provided in the Constitution. The present setup is that the President approves all decisions of NEDA. The proposed bill would make the President would have the approval or would have the approval lodged in the NEDA board where the President is only the head. Meaning that theoretically, if you follow that bill, the President can be outvoted in the deliberations. And that is not constitutional, because the executive power under our Constitution belongs to the President. All these cabinet members would derive their power from that mandate of the President. They do not have their own mandate, unlike the senators. A cabinet member would derive his mandate only from the President, and therefore all executive action must be approved by the President as head of the executive branch.
So this is a plan to make NEDA a super body of sorts?
That's how I viewed it.
So in the new Senate, will this be refiled or?
I do not know if they will refile it, but by my observation will stand insofar as that's concerned.
So you've already made this statement, you've already given this view
yes,
to
the
author?
Yes, I have expressed this view in the course of by interpellating Senator Gatchalian when he presented this bill.
So thank you very much, Senator Drilon. On that note, we end this interview, but we will stay in touch. And thank you very much to our viewers. We've seen how the opposition, as an opposition senator, need not necessarily be antagonistic, but rather work within the existing structures, but still fight for what a senator believes is good for the public. Thank you, and see you next time.